Okay. So are we waiting till 6? Okay. Let me just do a quick test here. All right. Are you able to see my screen okay? Okay. How's the weather over there today? It's a little bit warm. Yesterday was very rainy and kind of windy, and today it's just kind of windy, kind of overcast. But so we'll see. I'm not flying right now, which of course is depressing, but okay. So you're hearing an echo? That's really odd. Okay. Because I'm wearing a headset and I have a microphone. So there shouldn't be any kind of an echo. Oh, so any ideas how we can fix that? Okay. All right. Is it better now? Yeah, that's kind of odd because I actually, well, I guess it was set to default, but I have an actual microphone and headsets, and now it's set explicitly to that. So hopefully that problem has gone away. Yes, we're actually 2 weeks into it. And on Thursday, 10 minutes before my class that I was teaching in person, so we were doing online and in-person classes, the president announced that we are going to all online as of tomorrow. So we're back to online, and it looks like we're probably going to be online as well for the spring, unfortunately, which, yeah. Yep, Thursday, they made the decision to go to online only. The students are still on campus if they wish to be, but we're not teaching in class anymore. So they still have access to labs and things. I was actually teaching an in-person penetration testing class, and that got moved to online, which is okay. Last semester was really crazy for us.
Yeah.
In the middle of the semester, they went to online, and it was after a break. So we had a break, and the students never came back, which was really bad in the pen testing class because I was looking to do wireless testing, and it's kind of hard to do remotely.
Yeah. Have you seen Professor Scott? How is he?
I'm trying to think when's the last time I saw him. I don't think I've seen him since March.
I talked on Facebook with him a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been a while since I've seen him. He actually lives quite a distance from me. He's probably an hour away from me. All right, looks like people are starting to join.
Yeah, I should click admit in this Google meeting.
Well, let me know when you want to get started.
Okay, yeah. Just 1 or 2 minutes. We'll wait.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yeah.
See, I was sharing that I had a fun experience on Friday with an airplane that decided to start smoking. We were trying to start it up, but that's part of the reason I'm free this weekend, though.
Yeah.
It's not just the weather. It's the fact that our trainer has this problem where we've had a couple of electrical issues with it. It's one way to wake up your flight instructor. You start getting smoke in the cockpit.
Okay, I think we can start. Hi all, hi everybody. Pašķidēļ džilve, pandērišķieni kūč, elasad, piesane fundet ksai školas verorat izrautes. Today we will have Professor Polstra, Philip Polstra. He is a very talented, experienced person, and professor at Bloomsburg University, also in cybersecurity field, and also in aviation security. He will talk today something, I think, on that field. And Professor, the room is yours. You can start.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me. I told my family this morning, I'm like, I got to be in Kosovo in 2 hours, and they're like, how are you going to do that? I'm like, well, virtually. We'll get there. So thanks for joining me today. I was asked to maybe talk a little bit about things like hacking and hacking with fun little devices, and we might talk a little bit about aviation security a little bit later. We'll see kind of how things go. But yeah, so a little bit about me. I've kind of been playing with electronics since I was about 10. I started programming when I was around 8 or so. And I've been building custom electronics with my daughter. We actually have a little YouTube show. We haven't done anything lately because, you know, she's a teenager and she got kind of busy, but you know, it's called Daddy and Daughter Electronics. We build a couple of cool things. I also like to build things with my son, mostly out of wood. A couple years back, I actually built an airplane. I'm hoping to do that again with my children if I get the chance. A little bit involved with aviation, been flying for quite a while. I have 17 aviation ratings, including but not limited to, I'm a flight instructor, commercial pilot for airplanes and for helicopters, airplane mechanic, aircraft inspector. I'm actually a skydiver and a skydiving coach, avionics technician. Also, last year I was the flight instructor of the year for Pennsylvania. So just want to talk a little bit today about hacking and/or forensics with some small, low-powered, you know, pretty cheap devices. In particular, mostly going to talk about using ARM-based BeagleBoard and BeagleBone devices, and how you can do some cool stuff where you can combine devices together and make some coordinated attacks. And you can even use aerial drones. You know, everyone loves to play with these things. And what can you do in order to support your attacks using stuff like that? So, you know, why should you care? What I've developed and actually started working on this several years ago is a nice fully featured Linux that you can install on these little devices for a lot of flexibility. The pretty low power devices, you can run them for days on batteries, and they're small enough that you can plant them and you can later pick them up. And if you lose a couple as part of a penetration test, it's not the end of the world because they're not super expensive. Also talk a little bit about having a network of devices so that you can hack from a distance. Talk a little bit about my little aerial drone and, you know, what you can use that for. It can be nice for things like some initial reconnaissance. And in some cases, it might be the only way to get access to your targets. You know, let's say they have really good security, so you're not sure how you can get there. So, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about things like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of, you know, choosing a hacking platform. You know, where did I get to where I am? Talk about, you know, what aircraft I chose for that. It's not a traditional drone. There are a couple of reasons for that. Talk a little bit about what kind of things can you do with these devices. All right, so when I was thinking about this stuff some years ago, I thought, well, what do I want? What am I looking for? And I'm looking for something that's small and something that's low power and something that's cheap, right? I want something that I can afford to use and something that's mature. You don't want something that's completely bleeding edge where, you know, nothing works for it, there's no software available for it, etc. I want some built-in networking, and I wanted something with good USB support and also some convenient inputs and outputs. And what I settled on was the BeagleBone platform. So BeagleBone Black is primarily the device I use. There's some variants on that. There's things like the BeagleBone Green, which is like the BeagleBone Black, but a little bit cheaper, and it doesn't have things like the HDMI output. And depending on what you're doing, you might not need the HDMI output. So BeagleBone Black is pretty small. It's built, the BeagleBone in general was made so that it would fit in an Altoids tin. So I don't know if you guys have Altoids over there. Haven't really looked, but so it's like this mint tin, and there's a lot of people like to build electronics that fit in these various Altoid tins. So the BeagleBone was designed from the start so that the board would fit inside of one of these tins. And the BeagleBone Black came out a couple of years back, and it is like the super duper version of the original BeagleBone. It had a lot more power and memory, also had the HDMI output, and it was cheaper. Right? So it was pretty low power. The whole system, you're looking at less than 10 watts. The board just by itself is less than 2 watts. So that's not a lot of power. It's based on a 1 gigahertz ARM Cortex A8, has half a gig of RAM, has fast Ethernet built in, high-speed USB, and USB on the go, plus HDMI and tons of general purpose I/O, and a nice micro SD card on it as well. So a lot of really cool reasons to like this particular device. It looks kind of like this. As you can see, it's pretty small. And if you look, you can see that there are headers on either side of this thing. So you have 96 pins. So if you're trying to do anything, like you're trying to control something, this is a great board for that. And it's also a great board for hacking stuff. There are new versions, by the way, of the BeagleBone that are out there now, like the BeagleBone Blue, which is meant for robotics, and it has even more stuff than what this one has. All right, something I get asked a lot, especially from guys from the UK, they're always asking me, why didn't you use the Raspberry Pi? Because they really love their Raspberry Pi over there. Couple of reasons, especially if you look at the original Pi, it's not nearly as powerful. It doesn't run things like Ubuntu. The original Pi was actually based on an ARM6 architecture, not an ARM8 architecture. You might say, well, what's the difference? An ARM6 is not meant to be a desktop processor. So if I look at the processors in something like an Arduino, a little microcontroller, that's what the ARM6 was meant for. It was never meant for a desktop processor. So even if you were to look at, say, your cell phone, it probably has an ARM8 architecture, not an ARM6. And of course, the Pi is not really open. And it's gotten better with the newer versions of the Pi, but not very reliable. And also, they don't really, use power well. They're pretty inefficient. There's been a lot of power issues with the Raspberry Pis. Also, they're not very good in terms of having a lot of general purpose I/O. So if you want to control anything with the Raspberry Pi, it's hard. If you look at it, for example, I saw a guy that built this massive control panel for his son that had all these blinky lights and things. And he built it with the Raspberry Pi and an Arduino. So if you use something like the BeagleBone, you don't have to complicate things by having an Arduino to handle all the I/O and then a Raspberry Pi. You just do it all in one board. Other problems with the Raspberry Pi, the I/O is not buffered, so it's very easy to fry the board. It's also very fragile. They have these tiny little pins that are easily broken instead of those nice thick headers. And it's not nearly as compact. So there's a lot of reasons why I didn't go that way. Now, when it came to an aircraft to use to maybe put this thing up in the air and get it closer to my target, I wanted something that had a good payload, and that is a big limitation for a lot of these drones. A lot of these drones you look at, they don't carry much, a couple of ounces, and that's about it. I also wanted something that you could fly in the wind and that I could take off and land vertically, had a reasonable flight time and space for all my stuff. Plus, it had to be affordable. So in terms of the aircraft that I used for the aerial version of my little hacking drones, it's this guy. It's called a quad shot. So you take it off and land it like a drone, but it'll fly like an airplane. So why is that better? Well, it's much more efficient to fly an airplane than it is to fly a drone or a helicopter, if you will. Because with a drone, you're constantly, dragging yourself up in the air. You have to hold yourself in the air. But with an airplane, you can produce lift on the wing, and it's a lot easier. So you have a lot more flight time on something like a quad shot than what you're going to have with a traditional drone. So that's one of the reasons why I used that instead. Because everyone knows that helicopters don't actually fly. They beat the air into submission. That's one of the things helicopter pilots like to say. But, that's the reason why I chose that particular thing. It also has a built-in camera mount, and it has a lot of other nice features. Now, a little bit more about the BeagleBone platform and what I did there. So I developed kind of my own Linux distribution. It's called the DEC or DEC Linux. And the distribution was originally developed for the BeagleBoard XM, which is a little board. It's about, this big. It's not that big. And I ported it to run on the BeagleBone Black, which was pretty easy. Now, one thing about it is that this distribution was designed from the start for this purpose. It wasn't just like later I went, hey, I think I'll do that. It was designed from the very start. There's over 6,000 packages in it. It's based on Ubuntu. Ubuntu is good because it gives you nice support. I know that the later versions of Kali are based off of Debian instead of Backtrack, which was based off of Ubuntu. And the support, believe it or not, for Debian for pen testing type stuff is not near as good as it was for Ubuntu, even though Ubuntu comes from Debian, which kind of doesn't make any sense, but that's just the way that it is. So I wanted to kind of walk you through some demos. I'm not going to do any live demos because live demos are, always risky, especially, in a situation like this where we're doing things remotely. But so, you might say, well, what could you do with these sorts of things? So here's one quick thing you could do. So this is a picture of the hardware I used for this demo. I've got my Alpha wireless card, which is pretty standard. The keyboard/mouse is a presenter keyboard that I'd like to hook up to my BeagleBones because it's very convenient. And the antenna is a Yagi directional antenna. So it is a 15 dB antenna. It's a directional antenna. It has a range of up to about 5 kilometers that you can get a signal if you're out in the open. So here I'm using a Beagle. This is actually one of my lunchbox computers. I've made a couple of these. They have a 7-inch touchscreen and they connect right onto the Beagle. And here I'm just running Nmap real quickly to try to figure out, what's out there. So when I run Nmap, I can see all the different machines that are connected to this network. And when I look at that, I see one of the machines and I say, oh, what do you know? I see port 139 and port 445 are both open. And those ports tell me that they're doing Microsoft's file sharing. And I get really happy because there is a very well-known exploit out there called MS-08067. So if you're working in security, you probably have heard of this. It was admitted to by Microsoft in 2008. It was the 67th one that they admitted existed. And it took them years to fix it, like 3 or 4 years to finally fix it. And there are some machines out there today that still haven't been patched. You know, people out there running Windows XP that's not patched and other old versions of Windows. So when you see this as a possibility, as if you're a pen tester or just a hacker, you might get kind of excited because it's not just that this vulnerability is out there. It gives you really good access and it works almost all the time. The other thing that's nice about this particular vulnerability is that I can come along and exploit that vulnerability, and then someone else can come along and exploit it again and again and again, and it just works. So like let's say you lose your connection. You can come back and just hit it again and you're back on that box. So here I've run up Metasploit in the right window. And on the left, I highlighted the information where I said, hey, look, this machine on this address that ends in 140 is probably vulnerable. So let me go ahead and try to do this exploit. I'm using Metasploit. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. It's very easy to use. If you're not familiar, you can see all the commands that I had to use. I just said, use this exploit, set the remote host to the address that I found that was vulnerable, set a payload. I said, this is the payload that I want to use. And so in Metasploit, you can choose your payload, and not every exploit has the same payloads available. But again, this exploit is nice because you can use virtually any payload. So I use something called Reterpreter, which is a very popular payload because it lets you do a lot of cool things. Right? So I set my listening host to be my local machine, my little BeagleBone. Now, the listening host, you might say, well, why do you need that? Because there are different ways of attaching to your targets. And the most common way, well, I should say the common way, a very easy and simple way is you connect to them and you run an exploit, and then the exploited machine connects back to you. But there are problems with that. The biggest problem is that often the firewall on that machine might block that connection outbound. Most people don't block the connection inbound from your hacking machine to them. So a lot of firewalls will block things coming in, but they don't block so much going out. So you can do what we call a reverse connection, where you say, hey, I want to connect to that machine. I want to exploit that machine, and then I want that machine to come back to me. I want it to connect to my system, and I will listen on my system on a certain port, and I set the port to 8080 in this case, and I will try to run the exploit. So I actually type in exploit in Metasploit, and then it will run this and try to exploit a machine. By the way, you can also type in run, which is obviously a lot shorter, but a lot of people don't do that because it seems more satisfying to type in exploit, right? So a lot of people would just type in exploit. So if you can see on the screen, it says I'm starting my reverse handler. Okay, what is that? That is a process that's running on my little BeagleBone that is waiting for someone to try to connect back to it. Then it's connecting to the target and it's detecting what kind of target it is. It could be, Windows XP Service Pack 2 for English, or it could be Windows XP Service Pack 3 for, some other language. You don't know. And you might say, well, why do you care? It's very sensitive. A lot of these exploits are sensitive to exactly what version of Windows are you using, because you need to know exactly where in memory to target things. So then it says, oh, this is the version of Windows you're running. Let me attempt to trigger it. And then it says sending the stage, and then boom, interpreter session 1 opened. So that's great. I've gotten exactly what I wanted. Once I opened that up, I ran the shell command, and that tells me, hey, this is, here's a shell on Windows. So that is like a quick and dirty thing that I was able to do by connecting to this machine and just boom, exploiting it, which is kind of neat if you think about it. I have this simple, very cheap device that possibly is battery powered, and I just exploited, an actual desktop computer with that. All right, so other things you can do, obviously you can crack Wi-Fi. So here, to crack Wi-Fi, you have to put your wireless adapter in monitor mode, which I've done using this tool called AirmonNG. And now I've created a monitor mode adapter, which all that really means is your wireless adapter, just like your wired networking adapter. Normally, if it receives packets that aren't for it, it just ignores them. But if it's a wired adapter, you can put it into what we call promiscuous mode, where it will take other people's packets and not just discard them, but it'll let you store them or do whatever you want. And here, for wireless adapters, we call that monitor mode. It's basically the same thing. It says, hey, it's not my packet, but just go ahead and handle it anyway. So here I'm running another tool called Arrow Dump. And you can see on the top of this screen, it's showing you various networks that it sees. And on the bottom, it's going to show you different clients that it sees, different people in the area with their devices that are connected to some of these networks or not connected. So if you look on the left under BSS ID, it says not associated. That means that that device has not yet connected to any of these networks. But there are a couple of devices on the bottom that are connected to, it looks like, this network called CIS. By the way, interestingly, if you look on the right under probes, you'll see a list of a whole bunch of networks. So what's going on here? What's going on here is that whenever your device connects to a network, it puts it onto its preferred network list, so that if you're ever in that area again, you can reconnect. So it sends out probes to other networks and it says, hey, are you the network that I used to know? And here you can see a huge long list. Looks like the guy that's fourth from the bottom is looking for Kevin's Place, Catan Wireless 2, UFW, Mystique Ice, Holiday Inn Express, Fly DBQ, Grand Harbor, Renaissance Wireless. So you can kind of tell where people have been based on the list of probes. So that can also tell you something about them. A couple years back, when I was at a different university, I was sniffing some wireless and doing a little demonstration, and the president of that university walked by, and I could tell it was him because I could look at his MAC address and know it was an iPad that I connected to. And I could tell it was him because it had a long list of hotels from all the different cities he had been to recently. But that's probably not as bad as one time I did this in class. And again, this was not at my present university. It was at a previous university where I saw one client that was looking for a whole bunch of networks, and it was every strip club in the area. So one of the students in that class must have been at the strip clubs a lot. Or maybe his device was, I don't know. I guess he went there for the Wi-Fi or something. Okay, so from here, I used a tool called Air Crack, and it was able to take the packets that were captured, and then boom, it found the keywords or the password, and the password was password 1 for this network. Other things you can do with these little devices, you can crack some passwords. So here I'm using a tool called John. It's John the Ripper. And John is a very common password cracking tool. And what I've done is I'm using another tool called Hydra. So John is an offline password cracking tool. And then Hydra is one of these online password cracking tools. So what's the difference? The difference is if you're a hacker, you really hope to connect to a machine using some sort of an exploit, and then you want to, from there, get the password hashes and crack them offline because it's a lot quicker. Well, sometimes you can't do that. So here I'm using Hydra in order to connect to a system and to get a password for a user. So it turns out, you'd see kind of down near the bottom that I have a user admin with a password of password that was found pretty quickly by this tool. You can also crack your Wi-Fi. So your Wi-Fi, you're probably using WPA2, PSK, pre-shared key. That's the most common thing. You know, if you're a normal person, you go to someone's home for the first time, normal people say things like, oh, you have a lovely home, right? And then there's the rest of us who aren't so normal. We go to someone's house for the first time, and then we say, what's your Wi-Fi password? So that's WPA2 PSK. There are, of course, enterprise editions of wireless and things like that that you might use as well. So, you know, how do you make this easy? Well, there's this thing called WPS, Wireless Protected Setup. And how does that work? It works by you push a button on the router, and then you will click on something in your software for your device, and it says, hey, let me securely send you the password for this network. Now, in some cases, you don't actually have to push the button on the router. And, you know, there's a lot of detail around this, but it turns out there's a flaw in this system. There's a flaw in the way that it sends out passwords and tells you if you got the right password or not. So there are tools out there that allow you to guess the passwords for WPS. And this is one of them. It's called Reaver. And you can see that it tried a few passwords and it got the password pretty easily. It was able to guess the PIN for the router. Now, most of these routers will actually have the PIN on them. It's going to be printed right on the router to say, this is the WPS PIN. And this one was 503-25436. So it's very easy to get this. By the way, some researchers did some work and they were able to figure out the algorithm whereby some people, some manufacturers would assign these pins. And it was based on the MAC address. Well, the MAC address is something you can always know because every single time a router or a wireless card does a transmission, it sends the MAC address. So it's like, I'm a router over here, here's my MAC address. And you're like, oh, I can tell from the MAC address that you're a Cisco router because half of the MAC address tells you who made it and the other half is the serial number for the device. So I'm like, that's a Cisco router. And I know based on my research that Cisco routers assign these pins using this algorithm. So is this the correct pin? Yes, it is. And okay, it just told me everything I needed to know about that network. All right, other things you can do with these little devices. I call this one Pwning Win7 Like It's a Mac. You might be familiar with the expression like a boss. Well, this is kind of like that, but I said Pwning Win7 like it's a Mac because at the time, this is a few years ago, there was a well-known vulnerability on the Macs, and a lot of the Windows users were like, hey, Mac people, you're less like us now, where you have these vulnerable systems, ha, 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 ha. All right, well, what they didn't realize, this was a Java problem. It wasn't actually a Mac problem. It was a Java problem. Now, Apple did take a little bit of time to fix it for the Macs, but so here I'm using Metasploit again in order to use this exploit that's a Java exploit against a Windows 7 machine. So, here again, I'm going to start by setting up the different options and setting my payload, in this case, to a reverse shell. And I just go ahead and set all the options. I type exploit, and then boom, it said, hey, it worked. And it started a session. Now, in this case, it actually started in a session, but it's not interactive. It's just the way that this particular exploit works. So you see that I issued this command sessions-i1 that says, I would like to interact with session 1, please, which I see right in the line above that. It was created. And sure enough, you'll see that it says I'm running Microsoft Windows version 6.1.7601, which is also known as Windows 7. And it dumped me at a command prompt at the user's desktop. So it's pretty cool, again, being able to do something like this using this teeny tiny little device. This guy is kind of a Clickiddy demo. So you might say, well, what's a Clickiddy? You may have heard of the term script kiddie. A script kiddie is someone that can download scripts off the internet. They're not super skilled. They're not like an elite hacker or anything like that. Maybe they're just learning. So I invented a term for someone that's maybe not quite to the script kiddie level yet, and they're a click kiddie. So they can only use graphical tools where they have to click. because typing is hard. Script kiddies, being a script kiddie is hard. You actually have to type a little bit. So there's a tool out there. It's called Pwn Wi-Fi Cracker. And this is a point and click tool. And this is all you got to do with it. Literally, you can see right here, I said, what's the network? CIS is the network. And I just click on attack. And boom, it said, within maybe a minute, WPA encryption broken. And here's the password, Cisco Lab 1. That was the password for that network. Very, very easy to do. Okay, so how can you make this even more useful? The way you can make this even more useful is instead of using one device, you take a bunch of these devices and you put them together. And you put them together in some kind of a network. So what I chose to use is something called 802.15.4 networking. So these are wireless personal area networks. Now, you probably have heard of 802.15.1 networking, which is now known as Bluetooth. So Bluetooth is very similar to what I'm using here. So why would you want to do this? Well, now if I have the need to have more than one device, I can use this networking. I can also remotely control a device from, say, my laptop. So, 802.15.4 is nice because it's, pretty low powered. You can get like a regular device, which will, get you about 100 meters or so. And the pro devices, which will get you around 3 or 4 kilometers. Very easy to use. Unfortunately, not terribly fast. You're looking at about 250 kilobits per second, but it does support a lot of different topologies, which makes it nice. Different families, different frequency ranges. Don't want to go into all of that too much. And they come in these little packages. So you can see these little devices are using this Xbee standard. And they're made by a company called Digi. They're here in the US. Really, really nice radios, easy to configure. There's a couple of different versions. You can use the Series 1 adapters, and then there's the Series 2. Now, the Series 1 adapters let you do pretty much point to multi-point. So I can have one thing controlling everybody, and then I have, everybody else is kind of like my little minion. So you can think of it this way. I'm sitting by the hotel pool with my laptop with a transmitter, and I'm controlling maybe a dozen of these devices at my target. And these devices could be, down the road, which is kind of nice. I don't have to be physically close to my target. And then there's the Series 2 adapters, which you can use for mesh networking. And that allows me to do a lot of things. So let's say, for example, I had a really large target. Maybe it's a manufacturing company, and they have a big factory. And I can't just sit down the street and have access to everything. So I can use a mesh network so I can get better range through using a mesh network. So, there's a couple of ways I can connect these together. Simplest way is I can connect 2 devices together. There's a lot of other details I don't want to go into, but the way you configure these is pretty nice. You just go in, they have software that you can get that comes with them. You just connect to them and you say, I want to configure this. And this is something you could probably do on your laptop and not necessarily directly on the device. Now, you can just get a shell on that remote device. And it just, here's a little setup for that. But maybe you want to talk to more than one device at a time. So how do you do that? Well, there are ways to switch between devices that you're talking to. And one of the things that I came up with was to use some simple Python scripts. Let's see. I'll get to that in a little bit. I thought that those slides were coming up next, but so, here's an example of a little drone. And on the top of it, you can see there's this little handmade device. You see like those little hand soldered wires. That is the world's simplest adapter for an Xbee device. So you can buy a pre-made Xbee adapter that will do basic serial. And all I did was solder that to this little perf board, which I then connected to my BeagleBone, and that was it. I was done, right? And on the right, I have my power adapter. So my power adapter is nothing but a power plug and two 9-volt battery clips and a power regulator and a capacitor. And that's it. You can see how small it is. That's a SD card next to it for scale. Okay. And here's my power adapter. It's very, very simple. It's using one little chip. It's called a 7805 power regulator, a couple of capacitors just to make the power a little bit smoother. You might say, why do you care about that? If you don't use the capacitors, weird things can happen when you're not giving a nice constant power to electronics. Back when I was in college, I was trying to build this really cool furnace controller with another classmate of mine. And we've wired it up and we were connecting it to the computer and everything. And we could not figure out why it didn't work. And it was because we forgot those capacitors. So they're actually kind of important. Okay, so you got your BeagleBone and you want to power it up. You got different options. So here I have some power adapters that you could use. Obviously, if you're in a place where you can plug it in, that's the best. You see the white cable. The white cable is a USB power cable. So I will often take one of these devices and put it on the back of someone's computer. And that's nice and easy. Nobody ever looks back there, honestly. You might think, oh, someone's going to see it. When's the last time you pulled your computer out and cleaned back there? It's probably been years for most people. And then I have on the right, you can see the little power adapter I already showed you. And this one, it's kind of hard to see, but I've actually taken that little chip and I've attached it to a couple of pennies because the copper conducts the heat nicely. So that's kind of a heat sink. The top one actually has a binder clip that I'm using for a heat sink, as does the bottom one, where I have some AA batteries using a binder clip. So how long can you run stuff off of batteries? If you have D-size batteries, 54.5 hours is approximately how long you can run this stuff. So better than 2 days. C batteries will get you better than a day. Now, 9 volts, not so good. 6.8 hours, but it might be enough, right? So here is another Xbee adapter made for the BeagleBone. This is actually a board that I designed and then had made So that's why this one is kind of pretty and such. It's got the silk screening and all that stuff on it. And in fact, I even sell these. I started selling these after I, designed them, and this is in my first book. Mostly because people kept asking me for these things. But so it looks kind of like this. You can do it the hard way. So these are handmade, like literally handmade versions of this, where I made a mask, and here in my basement workshop, I etched it myself. So I actually made these using just acid and different chemicals. So different adapters you can use. Of course, you can just get a commercial adapter and then wire it directly using those 4 wires for the serial connection. So other things I want to say about that. Of course, you have to have a way to, carry all this stuff. And that's where containers come in. You can have these little metal backpacks for children, and also lunch boxes. So I have a couple of lunchbox computers, and they have these touch screens, and they have the BeagleBone or BeagleBoard in them. This one in the picture also has a USB hub, or actually that's a network hub. And of course I have my keyboard. By the way, the reason that this is Buzz Lightyear to infinity and beyond, that's how far I'm going to hack you. All right. So this is I'm going to use this little lunchbox computer to hack you to infinity and beyond. But I did make a newer version with my daughter a couple years ago, and that's one in little minions. It's like minion plus minion equals chaos, I think is what the lunchbox says on it. But it's a slightly different version of the lunchbox computer. This is actually something I built out for somebody else, another hacker called Jason Street. Some of you may have heard of him, but he built this thing called the Briefcase of Doom, and I built all the guts for him for that. Again, you want to plant this stuff sometimes. So how do you plant a device like this? Here I've got a little network hub, and I've got my USB power cable. Here's another version of the same thing. And then, of course, fun things like the air deck, right? So what I did here is pretty much on the power panel cover plate, I put a BeagleBone and an Xbee adapter and a couple other things. And I actually use the battery from the quad shot in order to run the BeagleBone as well. So what can you do with that? You can fly it in, land on someone's roof, hack them, and then fly it away. By the way, if you crash it, hack them first and then go and pretend like, oh, I was just flying my drone and it kind of landed on your roof. Can I get it back? All right. So again, earlier I was saying that you can just connect 2 of these together, or maybe connect to one from your laptop where you're controlling everything, and you can send it nice commands and things. But what I prefer to do is I have this little system where I have it in Python. So I have kind of a command center, if you will, and I can just say, hey, please switch to this drone, or switch to, drone number 3, and send it these commands. So each of these windows on the bottom is from a different drone. So as soon as I talk to a drone for the first time, it will bring up a window for that drone, and I can send it commands, and I will see all the responses. So it's just a very simple way of talking. So here you can see I said :3, that says, hey, I would like to switch to drone number 3, please. And then I start sending it commands. And then I will get the responses in a different window. So here I can see some of the responses from the commands that I issued earlier. All right. And this is the book I was referring to earlier, Hacking and Penetration Testing with Low-Power Devices. This is actually the first book I wrote, and I think some of you might be more familiar with some of my later books on forensics and stuff like that. But at this point, I was going to ask if any of you have any questions. Feel free to ask. All right. And are we stopping at 7, Ati? Is that correct? So how much does the drone device cost? So if you bought it here in the US, I would say that, you know, it depends on the configuration. But you can buy a BeagleBone green for, I think they're about $30. And then if you wanted to add the Xbee adapter, those will range between about $20 for the lower powered ones to, I want to say, $35 for the higher powered ones. In terms of the Xbee adapter that'll go from the BeagleBone to the device, if you just make, you know, kind of the homemade one that you saw where you're hardwiring stuff to another adapter, those adapters are around $10 or $15. Or like I have these kits, and the kits that I sell, I think are about $25 for all the parts and stuff. So, you know, anywhere from $35 to, you know, over $100, depending on what you're attaching to it. So it's going to vary quite a bit depending on the configuration.
There's another one, which is the best way to be protected by these drones.
To be protected from them or by them? Oh, okay. So, yeah, that's a good question. How could you protect people from them? That I'd say, how do you protect them from anything? These are tools primarily made for doing penetration tests. So, you know, how do you protect from these? You don't have physical access. I mean, that's a big one. If you don't have physical access to a location, then you're not going to be able to get in there and hack them using these kinds of drones. And that's one reason why I like the quad shot. I can fly in and I can, worst case scenario, I can fly over. I can circle somebody if I can't get in there and land it. What is the best way to learn and practice forensics for oneself? I would have to say, in terms of learning forensics and practicing forensics, my answer is usually about the same when people ask me, how do I get into pen testing, things like that? And I'll tell them about Pen Tester Academy. So Pen Tester Academy is a really good place for all kinds of things that you need to know if you want to do forensics, if you want to do pen testing. It's subscription based. I think that they recently had some sort of really good deal, and I don't know if they have an even better deal now. That would be something you could talk to them about, and they might be able to swing you a deal. But the standard price is $39 a month for Pen Tester Academy, and it also comes with something new called attackdefense.com, where they have all these interactive labs that you can do. I'm actually in the process of taking some of my courses in forensics there and converting those over to 100% lab-based courses. And that's something that I'm not sure when it'll be done because, life keeps getting in the way. But hopefully sometime next year, I think, those will be done as well. How secure are today's computer systems? Well, it depends on which ones you're looking at. What can and should we do to further increase their security? What can a random user prevent cyber attacks? Okay. So, obviously not everyone's computer systems are equally secure. I know here in the US, at least, some of the worstly secured systems tend to be owned by the government. What can you do to further increase your security? I would say if you're running Windows, I think the best security is don't run Windows at all. But I know sometimes you have to run Windows. Here in my house, there's only one computer in my entire house that runs Windows, and that's my wife's computer. My children have been running Linux since they were born. Right? So my wife's the one that has all the problems. She's the one that I have to threaten all the time. I'm like, if I have to fix your computer again, you're getting Linux. And then she starts screaming, oh, no, I can't. That's just so bad. But yeah, so what do we need to do? We need to, Linux is good. Macs are better than a Windows PC. But if you're stuck running Windows, I would say for the average person, update it. Just update it. Every single time that they push out those updates, sign up for the automatic updates. I worked for a company and we didn't do the automatic updates, but there was a guy on our security team. His job was every Patch Tuesday, he would look at the updates from Microsoft and he would decide what they did and if our company should install them. Well, most people don't have an expert like that on staff. So for most people, I would say turn on automatic updates and standard stuff. No matter what operating system you're running, you get emails from people you don't know. If they have attachments, don't open them. If you're having email software, don't preview files, right? Turn that off so it's not going to automatically open up stuff. And that'll help you a lot. All right, what about knowing if you are being hacked? Can the hacker target know that he is being hacked in some point? It depends. There are a lot of things you could do. There are tools. There are things called intrusion detection systems, or IDSs, that you can have in place, and they will alert you, hey, it looks like you're being hacked. Now, honestly speaking, this is not something that the average person is going to have installed on their computer, though, because it takes a lot of work to configure these things. One thing I will say this, the average person is going to have a firewall. Even if you're running Windows, it's going to come with a firewall. Don't turn it off. And if you've got a firewall, make sure it's on. If you're running antivirus, keep it up to date. I've seen a lot of people have problems when they don't update their antivirus. There are some free antiviruses out there, like AVG is one of my favorites. Use it. Keep it up to date. How often do these attacks occur? Every day, all day. I forget the exact stats, but it's crazy how many attacks are occurring every second. Every second, multiple attacks are happening right now as we speak. In fact, if you take a computer that is unprotected, you don't have a firewall or something else on it, and you connect it to the internet, it will probably be attacked within an hour. Maybe even successfully attacked within an hour. It's crazy how much people will attack stuff. I used to run my own servers. So I used to have my own email and my own web servers and such. And I had this little box that I bought many, many years ago for like $200. It was a little nothing computer. I had people from every stinking country in this world that were attacking that thing because they didn't realize it was a pathetic little machine that had nothing on it. They just knew that it was there and they would attack it. So, these are constantly happening. Is there any way to identify the person who hacks someone's account or something else? Okay. Sometimes, right? And that's where forensics comes in. And that's one of the things that I do. I teach in a digital forensics degree program here in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. So, one of the classes I teach and, one of the books I wrote, it was actually on Linux forensics. And a lot of Linux forensics is dealing with what we call incident response, where someone has hacked into a system and you do some forensics to try to figure it out. And of course, I've written books on Windows forensics as well. But sounds like what you're talking about here is someone that's hacked your account. So when someone hacks your account, it's more of a, hey, they got my password, right? They guessed my password. About 4 years ago here in this country, there was a big stink about, this WikiLeaks, and they're leaking all of our emails, and it was the Russians. The Russians hacked us, and, sometimes I think that people get like a really large die, and they just sort of roll the dice, and they're like, okay, and today it's Russia and China, so. So there are a lot of people who are going, oh yeah, Russia hacked us, and they, because they love our current president and who wasn't president yet, and so they're like, oh okay, so this is what happened, and this is all these bad things happened, right? So it was all like Russia did this. Here's what really happened: the head of the Democratic National Convention here in the US had a password for their email system that was password. And, everyone's like, it was an advanced persistent threat, it was Russian interference and hackers. And it's like, no, it's that your password sucked, right? So, how do you not become a victim like that? Don't have passwords that suck. Former university where I used to teach, I was teaching a senior class. So I had people who had been in there for 4 years. And the IT department would assign a password to you. And that password was your initials and your student ID number. They would go to give a talk with their friends, and it's like, hey, Bob, they put in BS for Bob Smith or whatever. What's your student ID number? Because in 4 years, these guys had never changed their password, right? So, don't have easily guessed passwords, and that'll help you a lot. But as far as knowing who hacks somebody's account, it really depends. And the hardest thing with that is, what kind of an account is it? What sort of measures have been put in place? So some of these accounts will have like two-factor authentication, where you have to have a token or something in order to log in. And there may be some more logging for those kinds of accounts. If it's just your general, web-based email, yeah, good luck. Good luck trying to find that person. I know on my campus here in Bloomsburg, last year they instituted two-factor authentication to log in for all the faculty, which I thought was a great idea until I started working at home all the time. Right. So now if I don't have my phone with me, I can't log in. And it would be not so bad, honestly, if I just had to log in once, but I have to log in to my website to teach my class, and I have to log into Zoom, and I have to log into my email, and I have to go check somebody's grades, and I have to do this. And every single system I have to touch on that campus, I need to use a smartphone app in order to connect. And it gets to be kind of a pain, honestly. Which is the best antivirus to have in your PC? Linux. But if you're running Windows, again, AVG. I like AVG. There's a free version. Biggest reason I like the free versions of everything is not just because I'm cheap, but I have seen a lot of people with messed up computers, and usually what happens is they got some free antivirus for a few months when they bought the computer. It expired, and they never renewed the subscription. When you get a free tool like AVG, you don't have to renew because it's free. You will always be up to date. The other thing is AVG is very good for performance. They find a lot of stuff, and their performance is really good. So that's one reason why I like them. Right. What are the easiest and most frequent hacking techniques used to compromise general computer systems? Actually, the most frequently used techniques are not even technical at all. The number one most successful attack is social engineering, where you're pretending to be something you're not in order for somebody to give you something they shouldn't. Right? So there's a lot of different forms of social engineering. That can be anything from phishing. You get an email from somebody pretending to be your bank, and they ask you for information, and then they, hack into your bank account. It could be someone showing up in person, but one of my friends is over at Dundee, Scotland, at the University of Aberdeen, and he likes to say that he wishes that more of these attacks were technical, because it's fun to play with all these tools. But the reality is, a lot of those attacks are not very technical. Phishing attacks, not very technical. Social engineering in person, not very technical. Which books do you recommend to read about security? Well, of course, I recommend you read mine. But no, that's a good question. There are a lot of good books on security. There's a lot of good videos out there. Again, I've mentioned Pen Tester Academy is a really good resource. But as far as books on security,
Hands on.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot to pick from. I mean, I can tell you some books that stink, but there are some good ones. This might seem kind of strange, but a book I like to recommend is, it's not for the technical stuff on there. It's called The Cuckoo's Egg. And it's a really old book, and it's an old story. And it's about a guy who was working at a university in California many years ago, where there was an attacker. There was a hacker from Germany, and he found this guy in his system because there was an accounting error. And he's like, hey, why is there this accounting problem? And he started tracing it and tracing it and tracing it. And he eventually found out that it was this hacker from Germany who was using their university computers in order to try to get access to government computers in the US in order to, get some classified information. So, it's a really good story. The technology is ancient, so in terms of the technology involved, you're not going to learn anything there other than maybe some history. But I really like that book, and I think it's a good story. You're attacked. What's the purpose? Why do people attack other people? A lot of attackers are actually insiders. When it comes to organizations, that's the number one place that you get attacked from, is actually inside. But there are people out there who will attack systems because they're bored, just because they can. So there's a lot of different reasons. They mentioned that a hacker can have different drones at the same time, which is the limit that a hacker has the number of devices that he can hack. There is no limit to the number of devices that you can have, like on an Xbee network. I mean, there's a practical limit. I think the most that I've used at one time is about a dozen, but you could go higher than that if you had a reason to. But to be honest, even a dozen devices attacking a network at once, since they're attacking all day long, right? I mean, you can go to sleep and they're still doing their job, which is great, especially if you're billing by the hour, right? You're like, yep, I was thinking about, be like a lawyer. I was thinking about hacking that system for you, so you can pay me. But there's no real limit. There's not a hard limit. It's mostly a limit of, how much stuff do you want to carry, and, how much money do you have to buy all those things? All right. Can I write down the title of the book I prefer? Let's see if I can spell it.
Yeah.
Of course, my spell check is not helping me. Give me a second.
Someone has wrote it down. Maybe. Can you check?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I just verified that I could actually spell that word. So yes, that is correct. Can hackers just use techniques just for fun? Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
People do it all the time. It's not necessarily a good thing, but yeah, I mean, if you're going to get involved in, being a professional security person, you need to adhere to a code of ethics. And one of the first things on that list of things that you're going to do and not do is you're not going to hack people that never asked you to hack them.
Yeah.
Like there's a conference I like to go to. I won't say which one, but there's a speaker who's spoken there multiple times, and he's a very smart guy. And, I respect him as a researcher. What I don't really like so much is the fact that he will hack people that never asked him to hack them. And he will brag about stuff like that. He's like, hey, I hacked into this ferry and I left people stranded in the middle of the water. Well, that's not really fun and that's not really cool because, you know, what if somebody had an emergency? What if somebody lost their job because they were late for work? And, you know, there's a lot of things that can happen. Yeah, I mean, so people can definitely do this just for fun. Which one do you say is the greatest hacking in the history of cyber? Oh, wow.
A lot.
It's kind of hard to say. It's like asking me, what's my favorite helicopter? Whichever one you let me fly. That's my favorite. The greatest hack and the greatest hacker. Well, that's really hard to say. I would say that there are definitely some well-known hackers out there. At one point, Kevin Mitnick was a very well-known hacker. And to this day, I will say this about Kevin. Kevin was really good at social engineering people. He was also reasonably skilled at things like hacking phone switches and such. But, you know, he does training today on social engineering and security awareness. If you don't know Kevin's story, he actually wrote a book a few years back about it. And he kind of told his story a little bit. He was on the run from the FBI for several years, and he was eventually caught. He was such a good social engineer, he nearly talked the FBI out of arresting him. He had almost convinced them that he wasn't Kevin Mitnick, and they were searching through his apartment, and they found a stub for a ski lift near him in his jacket that had his name in it, or either his name or a known alias. And that is how they actually ended up arresting him. But he was an excellent, he still is an excellent social engineer. So I would say in terms of social engineering, he's one of the better known and greater ones. And as someone mentioned, he spent some years in prison. Here's the really scary thing to me, especially as a U.S. citizen. Kevin spent, I want to say, 2 years in prison, including most of it in solitary confinement, because somebody told a judge he could launch nuclear missiles by whistling in the phone.
We heard that on TV.
And people were ignorant enough to believe it. And because of that, he was held. He was not charged in 2 years. He was in prison without being charged with a crime because he was considered dangerous, right? Which is absolutely unacceptable. And there was a lot of things happening. I kind of vaguely remember some of this. There was a big Free Kevin movement. You could get bumper stickers, things like that. But so, yeah, I mean, definitely in terms of social engineering, Kevin Mitnick comes to mind. Other areas of hacking, there's so many different areas out there and so many big hacks that people have done. It's kind of hard to say.
There is Snowden as well.
What was that?
There is Snowden as well.
Well, that's true. But Snowden didn't really hack anything. He just sort of, made extra backups, if you will. Right. And of course, what does Snowden teach you? He teaches you that the secret clearance system, the way that we assign clearances in this country, doesn't really work, and it's kind of broken. Right. But you know, that's a story from another day. But what is the hardest thing to be hacked, place or device? Hardest thing to hack. I mean, there's a big joke about what's the most secure system. The most secure system is switched off, has all the media erased, and it's embedded in concrete in the ground, right?
Yeah.
So the hardest thing to hack, you know, everything is hackable at some level. So I think if you have something you have no physical connection to, you know, no ability to access it physically, and it's not connected to the internet, it's going to be pretty hard to hack, but not impossible, right? I mean, there's a lot of smart people out there, and you know, in the US, the government developed something they call Tempest, and they can literally detect what's going on by looking at you know, radiomagnetic interference that comes off of your computer. You know, there's a lot of crazy things like that out there that people have come up with, or, you know, even the sounds of you typing on your computer. People have been able to try to figure out what you're typing. You might say, well, how can you tell? Because each of the keys sounds the same, but they don't sound exactly the same because of the way your fingers are on them. Now, if you're one of those typers, though, that doesn't know how to type, and you're typing like, you know, this, yeah, maybe they can't work so well with that, but you know, it's kind of crazy. Is it true that the FBI or the other government agencies recruit these hackers while setting fake exploitable, if that's word, pages or apps? There is some truth to that. It is true that they will try to recruit people. I know that maybe a year or two ago, there was a big push where the FBI was trying to get hackers to join them. And not just the FBI, but a couple of US government agencies were trying to get people to do that. And then a lot of people like, oh, there's no way that's going to work, because, you know, if you want to join the FBI, and this is still true today, I believe, you can't have smoked marijuana more than 16 times. I don't know why it's 16 times, but apparently 17, you're done. You can't be an FBI agent, but 16, you're good. But I think it's like not within the last maybe 90 days. It might be longer than 90 days. It's been a long time since I kind of was involved with the FBI and I was up to date on all their stuff. But of course, you know, I thought that was kind of interesting that people had this stereotype of hackers, of course, you know. It's like, who's the guy that's attacking you? It's this, you know, 400-pound guy, lives in his mom's basement, drinks beer and eats pizza all day, right? It's usually not really that guy. But yeah, they definitely were trying to recruit some folks. It's kind of a interesting situation, though. You want people who are smart, but you also want people that follow the rules, and, you know, some of the government agencies are a lot about following rules and things like that. Is there a point when absolutely necessary to hack a device for safety purposes from the government, for example? I would say no. There's never a point where the government has to be able to hack into something. I know that there was, many years ago, there was something called a Clipper chip, and they wanted to make this encryption chip, but a nice little back door to the government, because, you know, everyone trusts the U.S. government. Surely the U.S. government would never do anything bad to people, right? And that's exactly, you know, what they wanted to have, was this nice convenient back door. And they said, well, only, you know, U.S. government and or law enforcement could have access. Well, law enforcement, there's a lot of people in law enforcement in our country. Right? We got 330 million people here. I don't know how many people are in law enforcement, but it's a lot. So that could be anything from the local, you know, the local police be like, hey, I just don't like this guy. I need access to all of his information. And we already have abuses there. I'm not saying that, you know, obviously we have a lot of really good police officers in our country. Have a couple of bad apples too. But, you know, there was never, in my mind, a case where the government should have the ability to hack into my devices. Hacker was released because it was said that he could hack nuclear weapons. Is that possible? Hopefully not. No, he wasn't released because of that. He was put in prison without being charged, and he was there for years. And he was even thrown into solitary confinement because somebody told a judge he could launch nuclear missiles by whistling into a phone. As absurd as that sounds, at the time, this was, I believe, like early 90s, I think we're talking about here. There were judges in this country that believed them because these were, you know, FBI people telling him this. And so they were scared. Can I hack NASA with HTML? Well, you could try to hack their website. NASA, you know, doesn't necessarily have anything super juicy on their website anyway. But I actually, here's a funny quick story about NASA. Last summer, I have a friend, and she works for NASA. She is currently in Russia. She's at Star City, Russia. She's the national representative there. She's the deputy director for NASA. I taught her how to fly an airplane in 20 days last summer. All right. What do you think about bug bounty programs? I think they're good. I think it's a nice way for people to do some research and maybe even learn something along the way and make a couple dollars. You know, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think we are at the end of this.
All right. Well, thanks for coming out. You know, I enjoyed it. I know it was sort of last minute arranged. I'm kind of sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
You know, things have been a little bit interesting over here, but so yeah.
Thank
and
you
hopefully,
for,
who knows? Maybe next summer we'll actually, I'll actually get back over there.
You should.
I hope so. You know, I just found out it looks like I might be teaching online in the spring too, which makes me a little bit sad. But
okay, Professor, thank you very much. Thank you for your willing to be with us and give these talks. Very, very useful and very important. And I hope this pandemic time will go, and you and your family and colleagues and all of you will be good health and will pass this in a good way.
All right, to you as well.
Yeah, bye.
All right, bye guys.
Middle option.